At 9:08 a.m., my manager asked me to join a quick sync. He didn't say HR would already be there. He didn't say the conference room would be cold enough to feel like a morgue. And he definitely didn't say my name would already be typed into the severance document like a verdict. I walked in with a coffee I hadn't even tasted. 3 chairs on one side, 1 chair on the other. Mine. The HR rep smiled the way people smile when they're trying not to look guilty. My manager, Derek Voss, didn't smile at all. He kept his eyes on the table, like the table had answers he couldn't say out loud. "Claire," HR said, "this is difficult." I nodded. Because I'd learned a long time ago, the more someone says that sentence, the less difficult it is for them. She slid a printed packet across the table. My name, my employee ID, my last day, and 1 line, bolded, like a brand burned into skin. Violation of data handling policy. Derek finally looked up. An external review found your credentials were used to export customer files. My lungs didn't react right away. Not panic. Not grief. Just a weird silence inside my body, like it didn't believe the words were real enough to deserve oxygen. My credentials, I repeated. He nodded quickly, like agreement could replace proof. HR turned the packet to the signature page. "We can keep this clean," she said. "If you sign today." Clean. That word made me almost laugh, because I could already feel the dirt spreading. Through Slack, through whispers, through those hallway smiles. That meant, thank God, it's not me. I looked at the page again. There was a timestamp. 8,506 a.m. I had been at my desk at 8:56. I had been in a leadership stand-up at 8:56. I had been on camera at 8:56. So either I had mastered teleportation, or someone wanted me gone so badly, they were willing to burn my name down with the building. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't beg. I didn't plead. I just asked the simplest question in the world. "Can I see the audit report?" Derek swallowed. HR's smile tightened. "That's internal," she said. Internal. The second word that always means the same thing. You'll never get to see the truth. I looked at Derek. His hands were clasped so tight, his knuckles had turned pale. And then I noticed something small. A detail so minor no one else would have cared. Derek's wrist. A new watch. Expensive. The kind of watch people buy after they do something they promised themselves they'd never do. My gaze didn't accuse him. I just let it sit there. A quiet spotlight. And that's when he slipped. Not with words. With a flinch, like my silence was louder than any scream. HR tapped the page. "If you refuse, we'll proceed with termination for cause." Cause. Third word, third lie. I set the packet down. Carefully. Respectfully. Like I was placing a weapon on a table. "I'm not signing anything," I said. "Not until I see evidence." Derek exhaled like he'd been holding his breath since he was told what to say. HR's smile vanished. "Then security will escort you out." A pause. Then, softer, like she was giving me a final kindness. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." I stood up, picked up my coffee. Still untouched. And I realized, in that moment, something terrifyingly calm. They didn't fire me because they thought I stole data. They fired me because they knew I could prove who did. I walked out of that room, and behind me, the door clicked shut. 12 minutes. That's all it took to erase 4 years. But as I crossed the open office, I felt the stares. The pretend typing, the fake focus, the curiosity dressed as professionalism. Then I saw it. A Slack message already pinned on the number all hands channel. A company-wide announcement. Written in that cheerful corporate tone that always sounded like violence wearing perfume. "Claire Monroe is no longer with North Glass Capital. We wish her the best." And beneath it, a reply from someone I didn't even know. A single line. A joke. A knife. Guess the ops queen finally got caught. My badge stopped working at the elevator. Security stood too close. Not touching me. Just close enough to remind me I wasn't human to them anymore. I stepped outside into the New York air. Cold, sharp, indifferent. And I did the one thing they didn't expect. I smiled. Not because I was okay. Because I had just understood the game. They thought they were ending my story. But they'd actually given me a reason to start writing theirs. And the first sentence was already printed. In their own logs. In their own systems. In their own fingerprints. They just didn't know it yet. I didn't go home right away. I walked. Block after block. Because if I sat down, I knew I'd break. And I couldn't break yet. Not until I knew exactly what they'd done. Not until I knew whose hands had held my name like a weapon. I ended up in a cafe on Ninth Avenue. The kind with burnt espresso and outlets that never worked unless you angled the plug just right. I opened my laptop. Muscle memory made me type my work email first. Then I stopped. Because I remembered my badge at the elevator. The locked door. The message. You are no longer with us. So I used my personal email. And I did something I'd never done while employed. I started documenting my own life like it was evidence. Because it was. At Northglass, people believed power lived in titles. But I'd worked long enough in operations to know the truth. Power lived in timestamps. I pulled up my calendar. At 8:56 a.m., I'd been in leadership stand-up. It was a recurring meeting. It had a video link. It had attendees. And the host wasn't me. It was Derek, my manager. I clicked the event details. My hands were steady. My stomach wasn't. There was a recording indicator. That little icon people ignored because everyone assumed it would be deleted. But it wasn't deleted. Not yet. I tried to open it. Access denied. Of course. I leaned back, staring at the screen, like the screen would feel sorry for me. Then I did the next thing operations people do when systems say no. I went around. I opened my notes app. Started a timeline. 8:42 a.m. Badge used at lobby gate. 8:53 a.m. I'm at desk. Slack message to team. 8:56 a.m. Leadership stand-up begins. 9:08 a.m. Quick sync. Invite. 9:20 a.m. Terminated. A clean little murder. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Not spam. Not a wrong number. It had my name. Claire. Don't do anything stupid. Take the severance and move on. I stared at it, feeling my heartbeat finally remember it had a job. No signature. No emoji. But I knew the voice anyway. Because Derek had a way of texting. Short, clipped, like every word was a favor he didn't want to give. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't respond. Because response is a gift. And I was done giving gifts to people who tried to bury me. Instead, I screenshotted the message. Saved it. Labeled it. Exhibit A. Then another buzz. This time, it wasn't a message. It was an email. From Northglass IT. Subject line. Access review notification. My eyes narrowed. Because no one receives an access review notification after being terminated. Unless someone had just changed something tied to my account and the system auto-notified the owner. Which meant someone was still using my identity. My hands moved faster than my fear. I opened the email. It listed a system. VaultBridge, the third-party vendor Northglass used for client document storage. And beneath it, new device approved. MacBook Pro serial, ending 74K. Approved at 9:02 a.m. I wasn't even in the room yet at 9:02. I was still at my desk, still employed, still trusted. I felt a chill crawl under my skin. Not because I didn't understand, because I did. They hadn't just framed me. They had done it like professionals. They didn't hack. They didn't brute force. They used the quiet tools companies hand out every day. Device approvals, tokens, vendor portals, the kind of stuff no one reads unless they're trained to worry. And I was trained. I pulled up my password manager, checked my personal accounts. All safe. So this wasn't someone in my home. This was someone inside the building. Someone who had access to my desk, to my machine, or to the admin panel that could approve a device under my name. I opened LinkedIn, typed, VaultBridge Northglass admin. Too public. Too messy. So I closed it. And I did something else. I called Maya Patel. My old colleague from compliance. We weren't close like best friends. We were close like survivors in the same war. She picked up on the second ring. Claire? Her voice tightened. I heard. Yeah, I said. Silence. Then, did you do it? That was the moment that hurt. Not because she asked, because part of her had to. No, I said. They're using my credentials. Maya exhaled slowly. I can't talk about anything internal. I'm not asking you to, I said. I'm asking you one question. She didn't answer. So I gave her the question anyway. Did they open an investigation before they fired me? A beat. Then, barely audible. No. I closed my eyes. That was all I needed. Because if they had fired me for cause, for data export, for a real violation, they would have documented it. They would have preserved evidence. They would have escalated to legal. Instead, they did the one thing companies only do when they're scared. They removed the person who knew where the bodies were. Maya whispered. Claire, please be careful. I will, I said. And I meant it. Because I wasn't going to storm back in. I wasn't going to threaten. I wasn't going to tweet. I was going to do what operations does best. I was going to build a case so airtight it wouldn't matter who liked me. It wouldn't matter who hated me. It wouldn't matter who had a watch they couldn't afford. The truth wouldn't need emotion. It would have receipts. When the call ended, I sat in that cafe for 2 hours. Not crying. Not raging. Just collecting. And then I remembered something almost stupid. A detail, again. At North Glass, we had a policy. All vendor access approvals required dual sign-off for high-sensitivity accounts. And my account was labeled high sensitivity, which meant someone else had signed off on that new device. Someone at a higher level. Someone who thought their name would never matter. I stared at the email again. There it was. A line at the bottom. Small. Gray. Almost invisible. Approved by A. Klein. Avery Klein. Chief Operating Officer. The woman who hosted the culture town halls. The woman who spoke about integrity like it was perfume. The woman who never looked anyone in the eye unless she needed something from them. My coffee finally tasted like something. Bitter. Real. And I smiled again. Not because I was winning, because I had just found the first crack. And when you're in operations, one crack is all you need. By noon, the city had warmed up, but my chest hadn't. I left the cafe with one truth in my pocket. Avery Klein approved the device. That meant two things. Either she was careless enough to sign off on a device under my name, or she was bold enough to do it on purpose. Both were dangerous. But only one was stupid. And Avery Klein wasn't stupid. Back when I still worked at North Glass, people used to say Avery had a gift. Not leadership. Not vision. A gift for making anything sound ethical if she said it slowly enough. She'd stand on a stage, hands open, and talk about transparency, while her calendar was full of meetings no one was invited to. And now her name sat at the bottom of a vendor security email, like a fingerprint. I didn't need revenge yet. I needed a map. So I did what operations teaches you when you're locked out of a system. You find the system's weakest human. Not the dumbest. The tiredest. The one who answers emails fast because they're drowning. VoltBridge had a support portal. And my account, technically, still existed. At least long enough to receive notifications. I created a ticket. Not angry. Not dramatic. Professional. Subject. Urgent. Unauthorized device approval under high sensitivity account. Then, I wrote 3 sentences. Short. Clinical. The kind that makes a vendor nervous. Device approved at 9:02 a.m. I did not request or authorize it. Please provide the approval chain details and originating IP for audit purposes. Then I waited. Not long. 8 minutes. A reply came back. From a support engineer named Evan Rhodes. Hi Claire. I can help. For security reasons, we can't share IP over email. We can provide it to your organization's admin. My jaw tightened. Of course. Vendors always say that. Because vendors don't like mess. Mess creates liability. But he'd also said something else. We can provide it to your organization's admin, meaning the information existed, meaning it was one request away, meaning I didn't need access. I needed the right person to request it. And I already knew who that person was. North Glass's vendor admin for VoltBridge wasn't Derek. It wasn't Avery. It was someone no one ever looked at twice. Kevin Liu. Junior IT analyst. Quiet. Polite. The guy people only talk to when something broke. And he was exactly the type of person executives used as a disposable glove. I opened LinkedIn. Found Kevin. His green open to work banner wasn't there. But his face looked tired. Like someone who hadn't slept since the last outage. I didn't message him there. LinkedIn messages were too visible. Too professional. Too easy to screenshot. Instead, I searched my memory. Kevin used to grab lunch at the same place every Tuesday. A small Korean spot near the office. Because it was cheap. Because it was fast. Because it was safe. I checked the date. Tuesday. Perfect. I went there early. Sat in the back. And waited. When Kevin walked in, he looked the way people look when they can't afford to be late. Shoulders slightly forward. Eyes scanning. Phone in hand like it was a leash. He ordered. Then he froze when he saw me. Not like he was scared. Like he'd been told not to look at me. He hesitated. Then he came over. Slow. "Claire," he said quietly. I didn't know you'd be here. I figured you'd come," I said. He glanced around like my presence could infect him. "Are you okay?" I almost smiled. Because that question real concern felt rarer than money. "I'm breathing," I said. "Sit down for 1 minute." He didn't. He hovered. Like HR might appear from behind a plant. "I can't get involved," he whispered. "I'm not asking you to," I said. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table. Screen facing him. The email. The device approval. The timestamp. 2062. 9:02 a.m. The name. Approved by A. Klein. Kevin's face changed the second he read it. Not surprise. Recognition. Like he'd seen something like this before. "Kevin," I said softly. "I need one thing." He swallowed. "What?" "I need you to request the IP and approval chain from VaultBridge support." His eyes widened. "No," he said immediately. "No, I can't. If I do that." "If you do that," I cut in, gentle. "You're doing your job." He shook his head. "They already told us not to talk about your termination." I nodded. There it was. They didn't just fire me. They built a wall around the story, so no one could breathe near it. "Kevin," I said. "Listen to me. You don't have to talk about me." He stared. I leaned in. Just enough to make it real. "You just have to protect the company." He blinked. That phrase landed. Because it was the phrase they used on him every time they wanted him to do something ugly. I watched him wrestle. Not with loyalty to Avery. With fear of losing his paycheck. Then he said something I didn't expect. "Your credentials weren't the first," he whispered. My stomach sank. "What do you mean?" I asked. Kevin looked down at his tray like it could hide him. "There was another case. 2 months ago. A finance guy. They said he exported files too." "And?" I asked. Kevin's voice dropped even lower. "He signed the severance, disappeared." My fingers went cold. This wasn't a one-time frame. It was a pattern. A system. A pipeline. I kept my face calm. But inside, something shifted. Because if they'd done this before, then they'd be doing it now. And that meant my story wasn't just mine. It was evidence of a machine. Kevin whispered. "Claire, they're not going to let you win." I looked at him. "I'm not trying to win," I said. "I'm trying to survive what they're about to do." He frowned. "What are they about to do?" I tapped the email on my screen. If they used my account to export customer files, they didn't do it for entertainment. I let the silence stretch. They did it because someone needed those files. Kevin's face tightened. "You think it's a sale?" he asked. "Or a cover-up," I said. He stared at me like I'd spoken in another language. So I translated. "Round funding," I said. "Due diligence. Metrics. Compliance. The kind of stuff that kills deals." Kevin's hands trembled slightly. Because he understood. Northglass had been whispering about a Series C for weeks. Executives smiling more than usual. Town halls about our future. Free lunch on Fridays. Corporate perfume. And if something ugly was buried in the data, they needed a scapegoat to carry it away. Kevin sat down. Finally, the decision was made before he said it. "Okay," he whispered. "I'll request it, but I'm not sending it to you." "That's fine," I said. "Send it to yourself. Save it." He looked up. "Why?" "Because I needed him alive. Not heroic. Not dramatic. Alive. So when they try to blame you next," I said, "you'll have proof." Kevin stared. And something in his face cracked, like he finally saw what kind of place he worked for. He pulled out his phone. Opened his email app. Hands shaking. He wrote a message to Evan, at VaultBridge support. I watched him type. "Please provide originating IP and approval chain details for device approval at 9:02 a.m. for user Claire Monroe." We need it for internal audit review. He hit send. Then he whispered, "If they find out." "They will," I said. His eyes widened. I didn't say it to scare him. I said it because it was true. And truth was the only thing we could hold on to now. "But if they find out," I continued, "it means you matter." He stared at me. I stood up, left cash on the table, and as I walked away, I said the last thing he needed to hear. "Kevin, they think you're invisible." I paused. "So do most people." Then I looked back at him. "But systems don't forget invisible people." I left the restaurant with a strange calm. Because for the first time since the 12-minute meeting, I wasn't alone. Not emotionally. Operationally. I had a node inside the building. A witness. A crack in the wall. And when walls crack, they don't just crack once. They crack again. And again. Until the whole thing collapses. That night, at 11:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. An email. Forwarded from Kevin. No subject line. Just an attachment. A PDF. And one sentence typed above it. "Claire. It wasn't you." It was coming from inside the executive floor. I opened the PDF. And the first line made my blood run cold. Originating IP. North Glass Executive Guest Wi-Fi Floor 29. Floor 29. The executive floor. Where Derek didn't belong. Where Kevin never went. Where Avery Klein lived. And beneath that line, the worst part. Approved by A. Klein. Secondary approval. S. Halbrook. S. Halbrook. Sebastian Halbrook. CEO. I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. Because now, it was bigger than my termination. It was a conspiracy. And they hadn't just framed me. They'd framed me while the CEO signed the paper. My chest finally released a laugh. Not joy. Not humor. A sound you make when your brain can't process evil without turning it into something sharp. I whispered to the empty room. Okay. Because now I had exactly what I needed. Not a rumor. Not a theory. A log. A location. A second signature. And suddenly, the severance packet on that conference table felt like the funniest thing in the world. They wanted me to sign my silence, but they'd already signed their guilt. By morning, the city had already decided who I was. Not by facts. By silence. I opened LinkedIn. 2 recruiters who had messaged me weekly, gone. A compliance director I'd had coffee with last month profile viewed, no reply. And then I saw it. A private Slack screenshot circulating in an industry group chat. Someone had leaked it. A message from a North Glass director. "Let's be careful referencing Claire Monroe. There's an ongoing matter." Ongoing matter. That phrase again. It wasn't meant to protect the company. It was meant to poison the well. Because in finance, you don't need to destroy someone publicly. You just make them uncertain. And uncertainty spreads faster than truth. I closed the app. Because if I watched my reputation die in real time, I'd lose the stillness I needed. And stillness was my only weapon now. I opened a new document. Title. Risk Event. Third-party data handling irregularity. Not emotional. Not accusatory. Just correct. I wasn't going to accuse North Glass. I was going to force them to accuse themselves. Here's the thing executives forget. Every growing company lies about one thing. Process maturity. They love saying they're SOC 2 ready. They love saying enterprise grade. But underneath, there's always a crack between what's promised and what's practiced. And audits live in that crack. North Glass was preparing for Series C, which meant one thing was inevitable. Due diligence. And due diligence hates surprises. So, I didn't go to a lawyer first. Lawyers escalate. I went to something quieter. Something more dangerous. A mandatory vendor risk disclosure. VaultBridge, by policy, was required to notify clients of any suspected credential misuse tied to regulated data. And I already had proof. I just needed the notification to come from them. Not me. I forwarded the PDF Kevin sent. Not to North Glass. Not to the press. To VaultBridge's compliance inbox. With one sentence, "I believe this incident meets the threshold for mandatory client notification under your security policy." That was it. No blame. No emotion. Just policy language. Then I waited. Because once vendors start protecting themselves, they don't ask permission. They ask questions. And questions leave trails. At 2:17 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Claire Monroe? A man asked. Yes. This is Daniel Foster, Vault Bridge Compliance. His voice was calm. Too calm. We've received your inquiry. I expected you would, I said. A pause. Then, we have concerns. I let that sit. Because when a compliance officer says that word, it's already too late for someone. We need to understand the context of this device approval, he continued. Specifically, why executive-level credentials were used to approve access under your profile. I didn't correct him. I didn't say I was terminated. I didn't need to. Because the system already knew. I can help with context, I said. But I no longer represent Northglass. Another pause. Longer this time. That complicates things, Daniel said. It clarifies them, I replied. Silence. Then he said something that told me the trap was working. We've initiated an internal review. Internal. They're internal. Not Northglass's. Vault Bridges. And vendors don't like being dragged into scandals before funding rounds. Daniel, I said gently. Northglass is preparing for Series C. He didn't respond. Which meant he hadn't known. Which meant someone at Northglass hadn't disclosed the incident. Which meant Vault Bridge was now exposed. And exposed partners don't stay quiet. I'll need to escalate this, he said. I understand, I replied. When the call ended, I leaned back and closed my eyes. Because now the machine was moving. And machines don't care who built them. They just run. At Chasse 3 p.m. Kevin texted me. Just one word. They're panicking. I smiled for the first time that day. Not happiness. Alignment. CFO called it, Kevin wrote. Emergency access review. They're pulling logs everywhere. Good. Because panic creates mistakes. And mistakes create evidence. At 8:41 p.m., another message came in. This time from someone I hadn't expected. Maya. Compliance. I shouldn't be texting you, she wrote. Then. But something's happening. I waited. Then the message arrived. They've launched a surprise internal audit. Avery is leading it. I laughed. Out loud. Alone. Because that was the most predictable move in the world. When guilty people fear audits, they run them themselves. They believe control equals safety, but audits don't work that way. Audits cross-reference. And Avery didn't know one thing. Vault Bridge had already started theirs. Which meant two timelines were about to collide. And when timelines collide, someone always gets crushed in between. At 10:12 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, I recognized the voice immediately. Derek. Claire, he said. Too fast. Too casual. Listen, things are messy right now. Messy. I stayed silent. He filled the gap like people always do when silence scares them. There's talk of reconsidering your termination. There it was. The olive branch dipped in fear. We may have acted too quickly, he continued. If you're willing to cooperate. Cooperate with what? I asked. He hesitated. With the audit. I smiled. Because now he was asking me to save him. And I hadn't even raised my hand. Derek? I said calmly. Who approved the device under my name? Another pause. Long. I could hear his breathing change. I don't know, he said. A lie. But a weak one. Okay, I replied. Then I'll let the audit find out. Claire, he said sharply. You don't understand what you're doing. I looked at the city lights outside my window. No. He didn't understand what I was doing. I understand perfectly, I said. And then I said the sentence that ended his leverage. I'm not asking to come back. Silence. Because, without my return, they had nothing to negotiate with. He lowered his voice. This could get ugly. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. It already is, I said. You just noticed. I hung up. And in that quiet that followed, something settled in me. Not revenge. Clarity. They thought the audit would protect them. They thought my silence would save them. They thought removing me removed the risk. But risk doesn't disappear. It migrates. And now, it was sitting in their calendars. In their inboxes. In the questions they couldn't answer without lying again. That night, I wrote one final line in my document. Risk owner. Executive leadership. And for the first time since that 12-minute meeting, I slept. Not because I was safe. Because they weren't. By Thursday morning, Northglass stopped pretending everything was normal. They didn't cancel meetings. They added them. Calendars filled with blocks labeled alignment, review, sync, corporate camouflage. That's how you know a company is bleeding. Not from layoffs, from calendar congestion. At 9:14 a.m., Maya texted me, "Due diligence team landed today." I didn't reply, because that was the moment I'd been waiting for. Northglass was courting a lead investor, a private equity firm that loved one thing more than growth: clean books. And clean books don't come from speeches. They come from documents no one thinks anyone will actually read. The due diligence team wasn't flashy. No suits, no swagger, just laptops, legal pads, and a habit of asking questions twice. Kevin told me later they were camped on floor 21. Not executive territory. Neutral ground. That mattered. Because auditors never trust information that lives too close to power. At 10:02 a.m., Vaultbridge sent a formal notice to Northglass. Kevin forwarded it to me with shaking hands. Subject: Security Incident Disclosure Mandatory Review. Inside was the phrase that kills deals quietly. Potential misuse of privileged access impacting regulated client data. Potential. Misuse. Privileged. Those three words don't accuse. They invite investigation. And investors hate invitations they can't decline. At 11:37 a.m., my phone rang again. Another unknown number. I answered. "Claire Monroe," a woman said. Calm. Precise. "This is Laura Kim from Calder and Howe." Calder and Howe. The firm. The buyer. Or at least the one thinking about it. "We're conducting diligence on Northglass," she continued. "Your name surfaced during a compliance review." I leaned back. Not triumphant. Focused. "In what context?" I asked. "Credential misuse," Laura said. "And a discrepancy between access logs and executive attestations." Executive attestations. That was the soft knife. Those were documents Avery and Sebastian had signed, swearing nothing like this existed. "I'm no longer employed by Northglass," I said. "We're aware," Laura replied. "That's why I'm calling you." Silence stretched. Not awkward, deliberate. "We don't need opinions," she said. "We need facts." I smiled. Because facts were all I had left. "And facts," I said, "are time-stamped." I told her exactly three things. No theories. No emotion. 1. My credentials were used while I was on camera in a recorded meeting. 2. A device was approved by executive leadership without my request. 3. Vaultbridge logs tied the activity to the executive floor. I stopped. Because silence is where professionals decide whether to trust you. Laura spoke again. "We've seen similar patterns in 2 other exits," she said. 2. Not 1. A system. "We're trying to determine whether this represents a material risk," she continued. Material risk. The phrase that moves markets. I chose my next words carefully. "It represents a pattern of scapegoating operational staff to protect executive disclosures," I said. Another pause. Then, "Would you be willing to submit a written statement?" Laura asked. Yes, but not for the reason she thought. "I'll submit documentation," I said. "Not a statement." She didn't push. Because people like Laura know the difference. Statements can be argued. Documents just sit there, waiting. When the call ended, I opened my laptop, pulled together everything. Calendar screenshots, meeting recordings, vendor emails, approval chains, EP logs, texts. Not commentary, just sequence. Then, I titled the file, "Chronology of Events Credential Misuse Incident." No blame. No adjectives. Just time. At 2:28 p.m., Maya sent another message. "Avery is furious." I pictured it instantly. Not yelling. Not slamming doors. The quiet kind of fury. The kind that rewrites narratives. "They're saying you accessed data to sabotage the deal," Maya added. I nodded. Of course they were. Because when power loses control, it flips the script. But this time, the script had footnotes. At 3:46 p.m., Kevin texted again. CEO pulled Avery into a closed room. Legal present. That was new. Because legal doesn't come unless someone might be lying under oath. At 4:11 p.m., another email arrived. This one wasn't forwarded. It was addressed directly to me, from Northglass Legal. Subject: Request for cooperation. I opened it. Formal. Polita. Terrified. They wanted me to sign an NDA. Retroactive. In exchange for revisiting the circumstances of my termination. I laughed. Softly. Because now, I could see the end. They didn't want me back. They wanted me quiet. And quiet was the one thing I wasn't going to give them. I replied with one sentence. I'm happy to cooperate with any lawful investigation. Nothing else. At 5:02 p.m., the calendar invite went out. Company-wide. Mandatory. Subject. Executive update, immediate attendance required. Kevin sent me a screenshot. The meeting host. Sebastian Halbrook. The attendees. Everyone. The timing. 5:30 p.m. The end of day burial slot. Classic. But burying something requires dirt. And they had already run out. At 5:47 p.m. Maya called. She didn't bother with hello. They're delaying the funding announcement, she said. That was it. That was the crack becoming a fault line. Because delays spook investors. And spooked investors ask more questions. Claire, Maya whispered. What did you do? I looked at the document on my screen. The timestamps. The approvals. The signatures. I told the truth, I said. And that's when it hit me. They hadn't fired me because I was dangerous. They fired me because I was accurate. And accuracy, in the wrong room, is the most disruptive thing there is. Outside, the city lights flickered on. Inside Northglass, something else went dark. Not the lights. The illusion. And once an illusion collapses, no amount of executive meetings can rebuild it. The meeting started 7 minutes late. That alone told me everything. Northglass had always been obsessed with punctuality. 7 minutes meant panic. Kevin sent me a photo, taken discreetly. The executive conference room, floor 29. Glass walls. Lights too bright. People standing instead of sitting. No laptops open. No notes. When leadership doesn't want records, they take away the keyboards. Sebastian stood at the head of the room, hands clasped. Smile practiced. The kind of smile you wear when you're about to tell people the truth, but only the parts that won't hurt you. Thank you for joining on short notice, he began. His voice carried, calm, confident. We want to address some questions that have surfaced externally. Externally. Not internally. Not accurately. Externally. Because if you blame the outside, you don't have to explain the inside. Kevin typed as fast as he could. Live notes. Avery stood beside Sebastian. Not touching him, but close enough to remind everyone. Where power lived? There has been a security inquiry involving a former employee, Sebastian continued. Former employee, not a name. Never a name. We want to assure you this matter is under control. Under control. The most dangerous lie a leader can tell. Because control is fragile. And lies don't reinforce it. A hand went up. Someone junior. Too junior to be coached. Is this about the vault bridge notice? The voice asked. The room shifted. Sebastian paused. Just half a second too long. We're working closely with our partners, he said. There's no material risk to our operations. Material. Risk. Operations. He was choosing his words carefully. But words don't stop documents. Another hand. This time senior. Legal. Has this been disclosed to the diligence team? Avery stepped forward. Yes, she said quickly. We're managing the narrative. The narrative. Not the facts. The room felt colder through Kevin's phone. Someone else spoke, quiet. Measured. What about the approvals? Silence. Because approvals don't have narratives. They have names. Avery smiled. Tight. Approvals follow protocol, she said. Any suggestion otherwise is misinformation. Misinformation. That word hung in the air like a dare. Kevin's message came in. They're lying. I stared at the screen. Not angry. Certain. Then it happened. The question no one plans for. The one that doesn't accuse. It clarifies. A voice from the far end of the table. Finance. Unassuming. I'm looking at the vendor disclosure, he said. It lists 2 executive approvals. One from the COO, one from the CEO. The room froze. Sebastian didn't move. Avery's smile didn't reach her eyes. That's standard, Avery said. Too fast. The finance director frowned. For high-risk accounts? Yes, he said. but this account was tied to an employee under investigation. Investigation. There it was. The word Sebastian had avoided. So why were executive approvals issued before the investigation began? No one answered. Because time doesn't bend. Not for titles. Not for power. Sebastian cleared his throat. We'll take that offline, he said. The finance director didn't back down. Diligence already has the logs, he replied. Logs. Action. Plural. Avery's hand tightened on the table. Sebastian's voice dropped. This isn't the forum. It is, the finance director said calmly. Because this affects our valuation. Valuation. That word ends conversations. Avery turned to Sebastian. Not asking. Telling. We need to pause, she said. Sebastian nodded. Too quickly. The meeting dissolved into movement. Whispers. Phones lighting up. Kevin sent one last message before he had to pocket his phone. They just realized they can't control this. I leaned back, closed my eyes. Because the room where they broke, I didn't need to be inside it. I had already been there. 12 minutes. 3 chairs. 1 packet. My name typed like a verdict. They thought power lived in rooms like that. But power lives in sequence. In what happened first. In what happened next. And they had lost the sequence. At 8:02 p.m., an email went out. Not company-wide. Selective. Leadership only. Kevin forwarded it. Subject. Immediate. Hold on. Series C. Communications. That was the sound of the floor giving way. At 9:19 p.m., Maya called. Her voice was shaking. They're offering Derek immunity, she said. I closed my eyes. Because that meant they needed a sacrifice. Someone small enough, someone replaceable. They want him to say he acted alone, she continued. Of course they did. I pictured Derek's watch. The way it didn't fit him. The way guilt always looks heavier than metal. Will he? I asked. Maya exhaled. I don't think so, she said. Legal told him the logs contradict that. Good. Because lies collapse fastest when they're lonely. At 10:44 p.m., I got one final email that night. From Laura Kim, Calder and Howe. Short. Precise. We've suspended discussions pending resolution. Suspended. Not cancelled. Yet. That was worse. Because suspension invites scrutiny. And scrutiny doesn't sleep. I closed my laptop. Stood by the window. Watched the city breathe. They thought firing me would make the problem disappear. But problems don't disappear. They relocate. They compound. They wait. And now, they were waiting in a glass room on floor 29. With no keyboards, no scripts, and no one left to blame. The first domino didn't fall loudly. It slid. Quietly. At 7:32 a.m., a notification appeared on the North Glass intranet. No announcement. No explanation. Just a line under leadership updates. Derek Voss has been placed on administrative leave. Administrative leave. The corporate version of exile. Kevin sent me the screenshot with one word. Done. I stared at it longer than I expected. Not satisfied. Not relieved. Just aware. Because when companies put someone on leave without defending them, they've already decided who won't be protected. By noon, the story started leaking. Not to the press. To group chats. Compliance forums. Private equity circles where people spoke in half sentences and never put anything in writing. Northglass paused. Credential issue. Executive approvals. Have you heard? I didn't answer anyone. Because attention, at this stage, was dangerous. At 1:14 p.m., Maya called again. They're asking for files, she said. Who? I asked. The board, she replied. And outside counsel. Outside counsel. That meant the internal narrative had failed. When companies bring in outsiders, it's because they no longer trust themselves. They want to talk to you, Maya added. When? Soon. Soon is never soon. Soon is fear buying time. At 2:06 p.m., an email arrived from Northglass Legal. Different tone now. No confidence. No leverage. Subject. Request for interview independent review. Independent. That word only appears when someone is preparing to lose control. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I opened a new folder on my desktop. Named it Aftermath. Inside, I created 3 subfolders. Derek. Avery. Sebastian. Not vengeance. Accounting. I didn't need to speculate. The logs told me enough. Derek approved nothing. He followed instructions. Avery designed the process. Sebastian signed it off. That's how systems work. I sent one reply to legal. I'm available with counsel present. Nothing else. At 3:47 p.m., Kevin texted again. Avery cleared her office. That one landed. Not because it surprised me. Because it meant she knew. People don't clear offices unless they've already lost the room. At 4:22 p.m., a reporter emailed me. No subject line. Just a question. Did Northglass fabricate a data breach to shield executives during Series C? I closed the email. Because that question wasn't mine to answer yet. At 5:09 p.m., Laura Kim called. This time, no formality. No recording, she said. Off the record. I listened. We're pulling out, she continued. Not publicly. Quietly. Quiet exits hurt more than loud ones. They leave space for speculation. The board is scrambling, she said. Regulators are circling. Circling. Like sharks don't need blood. Just movement. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. What do you want, Claire? I leaned back. Looked at the city again. The same city that had swallowed me 12 minutes at a time. I want my name cleared, I said. Silence. And? Laura asked. I want the truth documented, I replied. Not buried. Not spun. Another pause. And revenge? She asked. I smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was tired. I already have it, I said. They have to live with what they signed. That night, I met my lawyer. Not aggressive. Strategic. We reviewed options. Settlement. Public statement. Regulatory cooperation. Each one had a cost. Not financial. Personal. If I went public, I'd be labeled difficult. If I stayed quiet, they'd recover faster. If I cooperated fully, someone would go down hard. And I'd be the reason. At midnight, I opened the aftermath folder again. Stared at the names. Then I added a fourth. Claire. Because this wasn't just about them. It was about who I became after the truth finished burning. The next morning, Northglass issued a statement. Carefully worded. Painfully vague. Recent findings have prompted leadership changes and a pause in strategic initiatives. Leadership changes. Plural. Kevin sent one last message before things went dark. Sebastian's gone. I closed my eyes. Not triumphant. Complete. Because the story had moved past individuals now. It was structural. Systemic. And systems don't care about apologies. They care about correction. I replied to the reporter. One line. I am cooperating with an independent review. Nothing else. Let the rest unfold without me narrating it. That afternoon, I received a document from Northglass. Signed. Stamped. Official. A retraction. An internal memo correcting the record. My termination reason removed. My name cleared. No apology. No explanation. Just truth. Typed. Dry. Permanent. I printed it. Held it. And realized something strange. This wasn't closure. Closure is emotional. This was alignment. I hadn't won. I had simply refused to disappear. And in doing so, I'd forced the system to show its bones. 3 months later, no one said the word Northglass out loud. Not in meetings. Not in emails. Not even as a warning. That's how you know a company didn't just fail. It embarrassed the room. I was sitting in a different office now. Smaller. Quieter. No glass walls. No slogans about culture printed in vinyl. Just a desk. A window. And a job title that didn't sound impressive enough to be dangerous. Director of Risk Operations. Not at a unicorn. Not at a rocket ship. At a company that cared more about what could go wrong than what could go viral. I liked that. The first week, no one asked me what happened. They already knew. The second week, someone finally did. Soft voice. Private room. What was it like? She asked. I thought about it. About 12 minutes. About 3 chairs. About a packet slid across a table like a death certificate. It was efficient, I said. She nodded. Because people in risk understand that word. Efficient harm is still harm. I didn't follow the news. But it followed me anyway. Avery Klein resigned to pursue other opportunities. That phrase again. Sebastian Halbrook stepped down quietly. No statement. No apology. Just absence. The board reshuffled. Policies were rewritten. Mandatory audits expanded. A new rule slipped into the handbook. Executive approvals require independent review. I smiled when I read that. Because systems don't remember names. They remember corrections. One evening, my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't saved. But I recognized it immediately. Derek. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I answered. Claire, he said. His voice sounded smaller now. Not broken. Reduced. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't respond right away. Not to punish him. To understand him. For what? I asked. For not stopping it, he said. Honest. Finally. They told me it was temporary, he continued. That it would all blow over. I closed my eyes. Because that's how most damage happens. Not from cruelty. From cowardice with a deadline. I know, I said. He exhaled. I lost my job, he added. My reputation too. I didn't comfort him. And I didn't attack him. Because justice isn't symmetrical. I didn't take anything from you, I said. You gave it away. Silence. Then he said, would you do it again? I knew what he meant. Would I push back? Would I refuse to sign? Would I let it burn? Yes, I said. Without hesitation. And I meant it. We hung up. I didn't save his number. Some bridges don't need to be burned. They just need to stay behind you. On a Friday afternoon, I received one final email from Northglass. Not legal. Not HR. From an automated system. Subject. Policy update acknowledgement required. I almost laughed. The irony. I opened it anyway. Scrolled. And there it was. My name. Not as a warning. Not as a footnote. As a reference. This policy was amended following the 2024 credential misuse incident. No story. No drama. Just a time-stamped scar in the system. I closed my laptop. And for the first time, I felt something like peace. Not relief. Not victory. Clarity. They didn't fire me because I was replaceable. They fired me because I wasn't. Because I saw how things actually worked. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. That night, I walked through the city again. Same streets. Same lights. Different weight. I passed glass buildings filled with people still typing their lives into systems they trusted. I didn't warn them. Everyone learns when they're ready. At home, I poured a drink, sat by the window, and thought about what survives when the noise is gone. Not titles, not money, not even reputation. What survives is alignment between what you see, what you know, and what you refuse to sign your name to. They thought silence was safety. They thought power lived in rooms with locked doors. They were wrong. Power lives in records. In timelines. In the courage to let the truth exist without decoration. I didn't burn them down. I didn't expose them. I didn't destroy anything. I simply stepped aside. And let the system collapse under the weight of its own lies. That's the part they never planned for. And that's what survives.